Have you ever lost your house keys? It happens to everyone. Now imagine losing something much bigger. Imagine the world losing 4 massive Boeing 777 airplanes. Each one weighs 200 tons. In December 2022, something incredible happened. Several of these jets, which used to fly for Singapore Airlines, took off from storage airports in Uzbekistan and Cambodia. They climbed into the sky and then they simply dissolved into thin air. But they didn't crash. There was no emergency. Instead, these American-made giants secretly landed in Tehran. How is this possible? How did Mahan Air, the most sanctioned airline in the world, manage to smuggle 4 modern airliners right under the nose of the CIA? Let's find out. But first, hit the like and subscribe button. This simple action is vital for me. Thank you very much. Chapter 1. The Madagascar Gambit. So, how do you legally buy a plane if the world forbids you from buying one? The answer is simple. You don't use your own name. You use a shell company. This is a fake business set up in places like UAE or Gambia. On paper, it looks like a normal company buying a plane for travel. But in reality, it is just a mask. But buying the plane is only step 1. You also need to register it. For these Boeings, the smugglers used a clever trick. They registered the planes with the code 5R, which belongs to Madagascar. Why Madagascar? Because the aviation control there is weak, and regulations are easy to bypass. They created a fake airline that claimed it would fly charter flights for tourists. It was the perfect cover. Then came the escape. The planes flight a normal flight plan, for example flying towards Uzbekistan. They took off and everything looked standard. But then, they reached a specific point in the sky, usually over Afghanistan. At this exact moment, the pilot turned off the transponder, the device that tracks the plane. The dot disappeared from the radar screens. The plane became a ghost. The pilot changed course and flew directly into Iran. This is known as the blue service method. It is the exact same trick they used to smuggle Airbus A350s before. It is risky, but it works. Chapter 2. The Technical Detectives. Why did they choose these specific planes? Why is the Boeing 777-200ER? These were not new jets. They were retired planes from Singapore Airlines and Knox Scoot. For a long time, they were just sitting in the desert, like the famous airplane graveyard in Alice Springs, gathering dust and waiting to be scrapped. Then they were moved to Asia. But the real secret lies under the wings, the engines. These planes are powered by the Rolls-Royce Trent 800. This is the critical detail. Most modern Boeing 777s use G90 engines made by General Electric. The problem for Iran is that General Electric is an American company that watches everything. They track every screw and every sensor. It is a nightmare for smugglers to get parts for them. Rolls-Royce is British. While they are also under sanctions, the black market for their parts is slightly softer. Iran may already have old connections to get what they need. There is also a simple economic reason. Nobody else wants these planes. The Trent 800 is an older, thirsty engine. It burns a lot of fuel compared to modern jets. On the legal market, these planes are almost worthless. This makes them incredibly cheap to buy with cash. For a smuggler, they were the perfect bargain. Chapter 3. Cannibalism and donor planes. You might wonder, why did they steal 4 or 5 planes? Maintaining just one huge Boeing is already a headache under sanctions. Maintaining a whole fleet seems impossible. The strategy is dark but smart. In the aviation world, it's called cannibalism. Here's how it works. Iran buys 4 planes, but they only plan to fly 2 of them. The other 2? They are doomed. They become organ donors. When a fuel pump breaks or a computer fails on the flying plane, they don't order a new part from America. They just walk to the hangar, rip the part out of the grounded plane, and install it on the active one. It is much cheaper and more reliable than trying to find smuggled spare parts on the black market every week. But hardware is only half the battle. These planes have no access to official Boeing software updates. There are no service manuals or technical support. If a warning light turns on, you can't call customer service. This has forced Iranian technicians to adapt. Over the years, they have become masters of reverse engineering. They have learned to fix complex American technology without instructions, keeping these metal birds in the sky long after they shouldn't have been grounded. Chapter 4: Geopolitics and the Powerlessness of the West. This brings up to the big question: where was the United States? The US had the most powerful military and intelligence network in the world. Why didn't they shoot these planes down or arrest the pilots? The answer is a frustrating legal dialogue. You cannot simply arrest a plane while it is flying 30,000 feet in the air, especially over neutral or friendly territory. Until the wheels touch the ground in a country that follows US laws, American authorities are powerless. They likely watched the shout happen on their screens, but they couldn't do nothing to stop it. So what is the future of the stolen giants? They cannot fly to London, Paris or Berlin. If one of these stolen 777s lands in Europe or North America, it will be seized immediately by lawyers and authorities. Instead, these planes will fly a limited network. You will see them on domestic routes inside Iran, or flying to friendly hubs like Moscow, Beijing, Istanbul and maybe Dubai. They are big birds in a small cage. There is a deep irony here. These are American machines, built by American workers in Seattle. Now they are the pride of a regime that considers the US as an enemy. It is a strange reality. A country that burns American flags on the streets is desperate to fly in American planes in the sky. Conclusion: the price of risk. So Iran did it. They showed the world a masterclass of bypassing sanctions. They tricked the regulators and they got their prize. But this is a victory with a very heavy price. Ask yourself this honestly. Would you feel safe on that seat? We are talking about a plane that is being kept alive by cannibalizing other aircraft. It has not had an official technical inspection for years. It is flying without manufacturer's safety net. It is basically a Frankenstein monster of the skies. Ultimately, this story is not just about aviation enthusiasts or secret agents. It is a story about survival. It shows us exactly how far a government will go to keep its economy moving. Every rule in the book. Now I want to turn the question to you. Knowing the history of these ghost planes, knowing they are fixed with scavenged parts, would you buy a ticket? Write in the comments below, would you risk flying on this Mahan Air 777? If you learned something new today, hitting the subscribe button is the best way to support me. As a new channel, every subscriber truly counts and motivates me to create better stories. Click here to watch the next video. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Do you know how airline CEO choose between B787 or A350? It is pretty obvious that they don't just compare how many passengers plane can carry or how far they can go. Even savings on fuel are not always a deal breaker. So today I won't do this. Instead, let's look at the exact hidden specs, which look really insignificant to an ordinary aviation fan, but they make a huge difference to the airline CEO. But first, hit the like and subscribe button. This is a super simple action, but I really need your support. For me, it is vital. Thank you. Chapter 1: The strategic bet. Frequency versus capacity. Let me start from the explanation why this comparison even makes sense. Some can say that the Airbus A350 is actually closer to the Boeing 777 than to the 787. And they will be right, exactly in the case of the A350,000 version. But others can argue that A350-900 is not a direct competitor to the 777, and especially 777-9. It is much closer to the Boeing 787-9 or 10, and they will be also right. But from the third point of view, the A330neo is closer to the Boeing 787 than the A350, and this also makes sense. So, what I wanna say is that manufacturers have the right version of the airplane to compete in the majority of niches, but none of their models are the pure rivals in every version. All of these comparisons make sense, but in different videos. If you wanna see some of them, let me know in the comments below. Anyway, let's get back to our main heroes, the Airbus A350 and the Boeing B787. Look, here is the thing. When Boeing sat down to design the 787, they were literally betting the house on a concept called fragmentation. They sort of predicted that era of massive hubs was ending. They figured passengers didn't want to connect in huge airports anymore. They wanted to go straight up to point, like from Osaka directly to Sanjus. To make that work, you need a plane that is cheap to run even if it is not totally full. And this brings us to the first massive difference. To be honest, for the 787, the most critical metric is trip cost. Basically, the 787 is lighter and smaller. It is optimized for around 290 passengers. It is designed to minimize risk. I mean, if you can only sell 200 tickets, on a big plane you are losing money. But on a 787, you might actually break even. So it's kind of a safety net for the airline's bank account. On the other hand, Airbus was playing a different game. Seriously, the A350 XWB was a direct attack on the Boeing 777 market. They focused on hub-to-hub routes with high demand. Mind you, the A350-900 is bigger. It holds about 325 passengers, which is like 30 or 40 more seats than the Dreamliner. Fair enough, the A350 costs more to fly than a 787. It burns more fuel per trip, no doubt. But here is the trick. If you can fill those extra seats, the A350 actually prints more money per passenger. It is all about CASM, cost per available seat mile. It is a volume game. You know what I mean. And listen, this leads to a hidden spec that almost nobody talks about, but CEOs check it immediately. Maximum takeoff weight, or MTOW. The 787-9 is sitting at around 254 tons. The A350-900, it is a beast at 283 tons. For real, that is massive. Well, airports charge you landing fees based on weight. So if you buy the heavy A350 and fly it half empty, you are literally burning cash on fees and fuel for structure you don't need. That's a nightmare. But at the end of the day, if you have a slot-constrained airport like London Heathrow, where you can't just add another flight, you need that extra capacity. In that case, the A350 is probably the better option. Chapter 2. The barrel versus the panel. The repair nightmare. Okay, listen, let's talk about what these things are actually made of. We all know that both planes are pretty much plastic. Well, carbon fiber reinforced polymer, or CFRP to be precise. But the way they build them, it is totally different. And this difference is low-key terrifying for the maintenance managers. Look, Boeing went full sci-fi with the 787. They decided to make the fuselage sections as one giant solid piece. It's called a one-piece barrel. They literally spin carbon fiber tape around a huge mold. No rivets, no joints, just one smooth tube. It saves like 20% weight compared to aluminum, which is huge. But here is the thing. What happens when a catering truck accidentally hits the side of the plane at the airport? It happens, you know? If you dent a traditional aluminum plane, you just rivet a patch on it. But on a 787, it is a nightmare. Seriously. You can't just cut a hole and plug it. You have to do a process called scarfing. You have to sand down the damaged layers circle by circle, apply a patch, put it under a vacuum, and hit it with a special oven right there on a tarmac. It is super complex work. I mean, if the damage is bad enough, your shiny 787 could be stuck on the ground for weeks. For a CEO, having a plane that can't fly is straight up losing money. Now look at Airbus. They saw what Boeing was doing and said, I don't think so. For the A350 they choose a panel-on-frame approach. It is basically 4 huge carbon panels, top, bottom and 2 sides, bolted onto a carbon frame. It sounds less cool, I guess, but it is way smarter for repairs. If that same truck hits the side of an A350, it is fair enough to say the repair is much more straightforward. You are dealing with the panel, not the structural integrity of the entire tube. It is kind of like Legos compared to Boeing's pottery. Chapter 3. The heart and lungs. Engines and the bleed war. Look, the fuselage is cool and stuff, but the real revolution is happening inside the systems. And honestly, this is why Boeing and Airbus went in totally opposite directions. It is called the bleed air war. Basically, on a normal plane, the engines provide thrust, but they also do something else. The plane literally steals hot, high-pressure air from the engine compressors to run the air conditioning, pressurize the cabin and de-ice the wings. This is called bleed air. Well, for the 787, Boeing said, we are done with that. The 787 is the first commercial, more electric aircraft. They straight up removed the heavy pneumatic ducts and valves. Instead, they installed massive electrical generators on the engines. I mean, we are talking about 1 megawatt of power generation on board. That is enough to power a small village, no doubt. Well, bleeding air from the engine kills efficiency. By going electric, Boeing saves like 3% on fuel. That is huge. But here is the thing. This makes the 787 electrical system incredibly complex. You remember the early battery fires? That was the price of innovation. And for mechanics, fixing high voltage systems is high-key dangerous if you aren't careful. Airbus? They looked at this and said, too risky. So the A350 actually kept the traditional pneumatic system. It still uses bleed air. It is conservative, I guess, but it is super reliable. Mechanics know how to fix it because it is pretty much the same technology they have seen for decades. And then there are the engines themselves. The A350 is exclusive to the Rolls-Royce Trent XWB. And to be honest, this engine is a masterpiece. It uses a 3-shaft design, which is unique to Rolls-Royce. It allows the compressor to spin at crazy 50-to-1 pressure ratio. It's legit the most efficient large aero engine flying today. And unlike the Trent 1000 on the Boeing 787, which had those nightmare issues with cracking blades, the XWB has been rock solid. On the other hand, the 787 gives you a choice, and most airlines pick the General Electric GE/NX. Why? Because it uses composite fan blades. They are carbon fiber, not titanium. This makes the engine lighter by like 400 or 500 kilograms. That is half a ton of free cargo you can carry, literally. Or $2,000–$5,000 of extra revenue every flight. So what does this mean for the numbers? If you look at the specific fuel consumption per passenger, the 787-9 sits around 2.31 liters per 100 kilometers. The A350-900 is around 2.39 liters. It looks like a small difference or whatever, but over the life of a plane, the 787 is just slightly more efficient at sipping fuel per trip. But remember, the A350 carries more people, so it balances out. Chapter 4. The Office. Flight options and philosophy. Honestly, this is where the difference between Boeing and Airbus stops being about engineering and becomes almost religious. Here is the thing. The philosophy of how you fly these birds is totally opposite. Airbus uses something called hard protections. On the A350, the computer is literally the boss. I mean, if you can pull the side stick all the way back, and the computer will just say, no, It won't let you bank past 67 degrees. It won't let you stall. It keeps you inside the safe envelope period. Boeing? Well, they have a different view. The 787 uses soft protections. The computer will warn you, it will put resistance on the yoke, like fighting you back, but at the end of the day, if you pull hard enough, the plane will let you do whatever you want, even if it breaks the plane. The pilot has the final word. So which is better? I guess it depends on who you ask. But for the CEO, there is another acronym that matters way more than flight philosophy: cross-crew qualification. Listen, training pilots is expensive. Low-key, it is one of the biggest costs for an airline. If you already have a fleet of A330s, which tons of airlines do, retaining a pilot to fly the A350 takes just 8 days. Seriously, 8 days. It's called a reduced type rating. They can even fly both planes at the same time. For the Boeing 787, even if you are coming from the 777, the transition takes like 15 to 20 days. It is nearly double the time. Mind you, paying for hotels, simulators and instructors for an extra 2 weeks for hundreds of pilots, that is literally millions of dollars in savings for Airbus operators. And then there is the tech right in front of your face. If you jump into a 787, you will see the dual head-up displays, HUDs, as a standard equipment. It looks like a fighter jet. You can land in fog without ever looking down. It's pretty much the coolest toy in the industry. The A350? Well, it focuses on screens. Massive 15-inch displays. It feels like a flying IT center. HUDs are usually just an option, however the popular one. Chapter 5. The passenger experience. The wits lie. Now let's go back to the cabin. Honestly, this is where the marketing brochures usually hide the ugly truth. I call it the wits lie. You know, the A350 is called XWB. That stands for extra wide body. Let's look at the raw numbers. The cabin width of the A350 is 5.61 meters. The Boeing 787, it is 5.49 meters. So the difference is basically 12 centimeters. You might think, 12 centimeters? Who cares? That's like a length of a phone. But here is the thing. In the world of economy class, 12 centimeters changes everything. See, when Boeing designed the 787, they kind of envisioned it with 2-for-2 configuration. In that layout, it is super comfy. But airlines love money, right? So pretty much every major airline squeezed a 9th seat in there. The seats on a 787 are typically 17 inches wide. Seriously, if you are a normal-sized human, your shoulders will be touching the person next to you. It is tight. Airbus, on the other hand, designed the A350 for 333 seats from the day one. That extra cabin width means you get a standard 18-inch seat. Look, 1 inch doesn't sound like much, but on a 14-hour flight, it is the difference between sleeping and suffering. If you value your personal space, you literally want the Airbus. Now regarding the air you breathe, it is a draw. Because both planes use composite fuselages, they can handle higher pressure. So instead of the typical 8,000 feet cabin altitude, both the 787 and A350 keep it around 6,000 feet. This means more oxygen in your blood and fewer headaches. Totally a win for everyone. By the way, we have to talk about the windows. The 787 has those famous electronic dimmers. No physical shades. It looks futuristic and stuff, but they don't block 100% of the light. If the sun is shining directly on your window, it still gets sort of bright and hot. The A350 is stuck with traditional pull-down shades. It is old school, fair enough, but when you close it, it is actually dark. However, in the case of Airbus, some airlines have also chosen an option of electronic dimmers. Chapter 6. The belly. Cargo and liquidity. Okay, passengers pay the bills. But cargo. Cargo is pure profit. Honestly, this is a hidden battleground where the A350 high-key shines. If you look at the spec sheet for the standard versions, the 787-9 and the A350-900, they both fill exactly 36 cargo containers, LD3s. So it looks like a tie, right? Well, not exactly, because there is a trap called payload range. Here's the thing. On a medium flight, sure, both planes can take a full load of passengers and a full belly of cargo. But what happens when you fly super long distances, like San Francisco to Singapore? On those ultra-long range routes, the Boeing 787 hits its maximum takeoff weight limit faster. It has to leave cargo behind to carry enough fuel. The A350 with that massive 283-ton weight limit we talked about earlier, it keeps lifting. Actually, on those extreme routes, the A350 can carry like 5 tons more cargo than the 787. Think about it. 5 tons of high-priority freight, iPhones, pharmaceuticals, whatever. That is thousands of dollars per flight. For a CEO, that extra cargo revenue basically pays for the fuel and the crew. It is literally free money. But wait a minute, there is one final financial spec, the asset value. To be honest, the 787 is the liquid king of widebodies. Boeing has built over 1100 of them. They are everywhere. It is super easy to buy or sell one quickly. But here is the thing. Boeing Common isn't always best for the bank account. If you look at the market numbers for 2025, the A350 actually wins on value. An A350-900 brings in like 1.25 million a month in lease payments. The 787-9, it is sitting lower at around 1.10 million. So even though the A350 costs more to buy, it holds its value better. Analysts say it has better residual value stability, because the market isn't flooded with them yet, and demand is high. Basically, for a CEO, the 787 is a liquid asset you can flip fast. But the A350 is a stronger asset that generates more cash every single month. Conclusion and verdict. Look, theory is cool, but let's see how this actually plays on the real world. Why do airlines really choose one over the another? Take Delta Airlines. They operate both. Actually, it makes perfect sense. They use the A350-900 as their flagship for heavy routes across the Pacific. But for routes that are a bit thinner, like New York to London, the A350 is too big and heavy. So they ordered the Boeing 787-10. It fits perfectly in the middle. They literally use the right tool for the right job. Then look at Singapore Airlines. They fly the longest flight in the world, Singapore to New York, 18 hours. They choose the A350-900 ULR. Why? Because, as we discussed in Chapter 6, the 787 hits a weight limit on those extreme ranges. The A350's fuel system allowed them to fly the distance and still make money. No doubt, Airbus won that niche. And finally, Emirates. This is where it gets spicy. They ordered 50 A350-900. Why? Because the Rolls-Royce XWB engine proved it can handle the desert heat and sand. Mind you, they are still fighting with Rolls-Royce about the bigger engines for the A350-1000, complaining about maintenance costs. But for the 900, they trusted more than the early engines on the 787. So in the desert, reliability was the deal breaker. So here is the final verdict. Choose the Boeing 787 if you want to open new routes between smaller cities, point to point. You want the lowest possible cost per trip to minimize risk. You need a liquid asset that is easily to buy and sell. Choose the Airbus A350 if you are replacing big Boeing 777s and fly between major hubs. You have a bunch of A330 pilots and want to save millions on training. You need that extra cargo capacity on super long flights. You want the passengers to love you for those 18-inch seats. At the end of the day, it is not about which plane is better. The 787 is a surgeon's scalpel, precise and efficient. The A350 is a Slitge hammer, powerful and capable. Anyway, both work if you know what you are doing. Which one would you choose if it was your money? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to sub. See you in the next one. Look at this. It is elegant, isn't it? A true giant of the skies. This is the Airbus A340. Now look at this. It's being torn apart, scrapped, crushed into metal cubes. Here is the mystery. The A340 is technically one of the safest planes ever built. In over 30 years of flying, not a single passenger has ever died in an accident on this aircraft. Zero. Usually, airlines keep safe planes forever. But with the A340, they did the opposite. They retired them faster than any other modern jet. Why? The answer isn't about bad engines or poor design. It is much sadder than that. The A340 was an engineering masterpiece. It was the perfect plane for an era that ended the exact moment it started flying. Before we dive into this story of bad luck and big ambitions, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps me a lot. Now let's find out where it all went wrong. Born in the age of fear. To understand the tragedy of this plane, we have to look at its wings. Why does it have 4 engines? Today, almost every long-distance plane has only 2. 4 engines mean more fuel, more maintenance, and much more money. It seems like a waste. But in the 1980s, where the A340 was designed, this wasn't a mistake. It was a necessity. Back then, aviation was controlled by something called the 60-minute rule. The rule was simple. If a plane has only 2 engines, it was not allowed to fly more than 60 minutes away from the nearest airport. Regulators were terrified. They thought that if one engine failed over the ocean, the second one might fail too, leaving the plane to glide into the water. This was a huge problem for airlines. You cannot fly straight across the Atlantic or the Pacific Ocean if you have to stay close to land. So Airbus made a strategic bet. They designed the A340 with 4 engines. This allowed the plane to fly anywhere, crossing any ocean without restrictions. Airbus didn't just sell the technology, they sold the feeling of safety. Their marketing slogan was legendary: 4 engines, 4 long hours. They were basically telling the world, 2 engines are for short trips. Real, safe, intercontinental travels needs 4. Airbus bet billions of dollars on one specific idea, that the world would always be afraid of flying over the ocean on 2 engines. It was a smart bet in 1980s, but the world was about to change. Betrayal of the rules. ETOPS and the curse of timing. Just as the first A340s were being delivered to customers, the rules of the game changed completely. A new acronym appeared in the aviation world. Officially, it stands for Extended Range Twin Engine Operational Performance Standards. But pilots had a funnier name for it: engines turn or passengers swim. Jokes aside, ETOPS meant that engine technology had become incredibly reliable. Regulators looked at the data and realized that modern engines almost never failed. So they increased the limit. First 220 minutes, then 280 minutes away from an airport. Suddenly, the oceans were open for twin-engine planes. This was a nightmare for Airbus. Their main advantage, having 4 engines for safety, was no longer unique. And then the true villain of this story arrived: the Boeing 777. The 777 was a monster. It could carry the same number of passengers as the A340. It could fly the same long distances. But it did all of this with only 2 engines. For airline accountants, a plane with 2 engines is much cheaper than a plane with 4. You buy 2 fewer engines, you repair 2 fewer engines. The maintenance cost dropped by nearly 30%. Almost overnight, the A340 became obsolete. It was like buying the best DVD player in the world on the exact day Netflix was invented. Flying hair dryer. If you talk to pilots or aviation fans, they often laugh when you mention the A340, specifically the 300 version. They have a special nickname for its engines, the hair dryers. Why? Because Airbus made a strange decision choice. To save fuel, they didn't put massive powerful engines on the plane. Instead, they used 4 small CFM56 engines. These are excellent engines for a small plane, like the Boeing 737, but on a huge, heavy A340 filled with hundreds of passengers and fuel for 12-hour flight, they looked tiny. The result is that the A340 climbs incredibly slowly. When you watch a video of this plane taking off, it feels like it will never leave the ground. It seems to use every single meter of the runway. This slow climb created one of the most famous jokes in aviation history. The A340 doesn't actually fly by aerodynamics. It is so slow that the Earth curves away beneath it. In reality, the plane was doing exactly it was designed to do. It was optimized for efficiency, not power. But the reputation stuck. To the world, it looked like a weak giant struggling to get into the sky. A stab in the back from his own brother. But the A340 didn't just lose to Boeing. The most painful blow came from inside of its own family. You see, when Airbus designed the A340, they also designed a twin brother, the Airbus A330. These 2 planes are almost identical. They share the same fuselage, the same wings, and the same cockpit. If you sit inside as a passenger, you cannot tell the difference. The only real difference is under the wings. Originally, this made perfect sense. The A330 was designed for medium distances, and the A340 was the long-range expert. They were supposed to work together as a team, but then technology improved. The A330 got better engines and could carry more fuel. Slowly, it started flying farther and farther. Soon, the short-range brother could fly across the Atlantic just as easily as the 4-engine giant. Airlines asked a simple question: why should we buy the expensive A340 if the cheaper A330 can do the same job? It became a classic case of corporate cannibalism. The A330 became a global bestseller, while the A340 gathered dust. Airbus had accidentally built the weapon that killed their own flagship. Attempt at revenge. A340-600. Airbus didn't give up without a fight. They decided that if they couldn't beat Boeing on efficiency, they would beat them on size. They made it longer. And then they made it even longer. The result was the A340-600. At the time, it was the longest passenger plane in the world. It was so long and thin that people gave it a nickname:
The flying pencil. It was a beast of a machine, designed to carry almost 400 passengers. And because the plane was so long, engineers had to be creative to save space. This led to one of the coolest features in modern aviation. On some A340-600s, you won't find the toilets in the main cabin. Instead, you see a staircase leading down into the darkness. If you walk down the stairs, you find a block of toilets located in the cargo hold, underneath the passengers. It looks futuristic, almost like a private jet or a nightclub. Passengers love it. But cool toilets couldn't save the plane. Just as the flying pencil entered the market, Boeing released their ultimate weapon, the 777-300ER. It was almost the same size as the A340-600. It had the same range. But once again, it had only two massive engines. The Boeing 777-300ER burned 20% less fuel. For airlines, the choice was obvious. The A340-600 was a beautiful engineering achievement, but economically, it was dead on arrival. Absurd accidents. Lucky in misfortune. I said in the start that the A340 was incredibly safe, but that doesn't mean it hasn't crashed. In fact, the A340 has a strange record. Usually, when a big jet is destroyed, it is a tragedy with many victims. But with the A340, it is a miracle. In 2005, Air France Flight 358 landed in Toronto during a terrible storm. The runway was wet and slippery. The plane didn't stop. It shut off the end of the runway and burst into flames. The aircraft was completely destroyed by the fire. And yet, all 309 people on board survived. They evacuated in less than 90 seconds. It proved that the A340 was built like a tank. It protected its passengers until the very end. But the most famous accident didn't happen in the sky. It happened on the ground. And it is the perfect example of this plane's bad luck. In 2007, at the Airbus factory in Toulouse, engineers were testing a brand new A340-600. It was painted in the beautiful colors of Etihad Airways, ready to be delivered. The crew needed to test the engines, but they made a foolish mistake. They didn't put hooks, safety blocks behind the wheels. Then they turned all four engines to maximum power.
$200 million straight into the wall. I don't know how we're going to explain this one.
The brakes screamed. The plane overpowered them. It lurched forward and smashed straight into a concrete wall. The front of the plane was crashed. The cockpit broke off. A brand new $200 million jet was written off as scrap metal before it had carried a single paying passenger. That is the story of the A340. Tough enough to save everyone in a disaster, but unlucky enough to crash into a wall before leaving the factory. So where are these giants today? If you go to a major airport, you probably won't see one. Most A340s have been sent to the desert to be scrapped. Their metal is recycled into soda cans and window frames. But there are a few survivors. The biggest fan of the A340 is surprisingly Lufthansa. While other airlines rushed to sell them, the German kept flying them. Why? Because Lufthansa owns these planes completely. They don't have to pay expensive monthly rents to banks. For them, the A340-600 is still a useful workhorse, carrying hundreds of passengers out of Munich and Frankfurt every day. There is also a strange sanctuary for these planes in the Middle East – Iran. Because of international sanctions, Iranian airlines cannot buy new jets from Boeing or Airbus. They are desperate for parts and planes. So they secretly buy old A340s from all over the world. If you go to Tehran today, It is like a time capsule, full of these four-engine legions flying for Mach air. But perhaps the most famous A340s were once used by the German government. For years, the German Chancellor flew on the VIP version of the A340 named Konrad Adenauer. But remember, this is the unlucky plane. The government jet became a national joke. It broke down constantly. It had electrical failures, tire problems. Once Chancellor Angela Merkel was on her way to the G20 summit in Argentina, and the plane's communication system failed completely. She had to land and take a commercial flight like a normal passenger. Eventually, Germany got tired of the embarrassment and retired the planes early. Today, the market value of an A340 is shockingly low. You can buy a functioning A340 for $12 million. That is the price of a small, second-hand business jet. You could technically buy one yourself. But be warned, the plane is cheap. But filling the gas tank just once might cost you more than the plane itself. Conclusion. The story of the Airbus A340 is not a story of failure, it is a story of bad timing. This wasn't a bad plane. In fact, it was a magnificent machine. It was comfortable, quiet, and incredibly safe. It did everything the engineers asked it to do. But it was defeated by something it couldn't fight: the price of oil and the relentless march of technology. It was a victim of progress. As we watch the last A340s disappear from our airports, we are losing something special. We are losing the era of elegance. There is something powerful about seeing a plane with four engines. It looks strong. It looks like it's over the sky. But the aviation world doesn't care about beauty, it cares about efficiency. Today the skies are filled with twin-engine jets that all look exactly the same. They are cheaper, they are cleaner, and they are sensible. But they are also a little bit boring. The A340 was the last of its kind. It was the unluckiest plane in the world. But for those of us who love aviation, it will always be one of the most beautiful. Now I want to ask you, do you miss the era of four-engine giants? Or do you prefer the efficiency of modern twin jets? Write your thoughts in the comments. If you learned something new today, hitting that subscribe button is the best way to support me. As a new channel, every subscriber truly counts and motivates me to create better stories. Thanks for watching, and see you next time!
In a world where airlines fight for every drop of fuel and retire planes after just 15 years, these giants are dinosaurs. The MD-11 is loud, dirty, and incredibly thirsty for fuel. Passenger airlines gave up on this play way back in the early 2000s. But look at the night sky. It is still swarming with them. Why do the richest logistic companies in the world still cling to technology from the 1980s? The answer lies in the mass. It goes against all common sense, but it makes billions of dollars. But first, hit the like and subscribe button. This simple action is vital for me. Thank you very much. Mathematics. Capital expenditures versus fuel. Wait, doesn't an old plane like this burn money every time it flies? Let's look at the real difference between owning a plane and flying it. If you wanna buy a brand new Boeing 777 freighter today, the official price is around $352 million. In reality, after negotiations, airlines pay about $160 to $170 million. That is still a huge amount of money. Now let's look at the MD-11. FedEx and UPS were smart. They bought these used planes from passenger airlines for peanuts, maybe $10 or $20 million each. Then they spent about $15 million to convert them into cargo planes. The final price for a ready-to-fly MD-11? Only $25 to $35 million. For the price of just one shiny new Boeing 777, you can buy a fleet of 5 or 6 MD-11s. But what about the gas? It is true, the MD-11 is thirsty. It burns about 20 to 25% more fuel than a modern jet. That is roughly 8,000 kilograms of fuel per hour compared to 6,000 kilograms in a 777. However, unless oil prices explode to $150 a barrel, that extra fuel cost simply doesn't matter. Today, with oil sitting comfortably around $60 or $70, the math is even better. The massive amount of money you save on buying the plane easily covers the fuel bill for years. As they say in the airline business, the best plane is the plane with no monthly payments. The lazy plane factor. Utilization. So why doesn't this math work for passenger airlines? Why doesn't KLM fly old cheap planes? It is because the business models are completely different. To pay for itself, a modern jet must be in the sky for 14 to 16 hours every day. When you fly that much, saving fuel is the most important thing in the world. But cargo is a different game. The life of a FedEx MD-11 is actually very lazy. It usually flies a short trip at night to a major hub, like Memphis or Louisville. It sits on the ground all day long while packages are sorted. Finally, it flies back the next night. In total, it might only fly for 3 to 6 hours a day. Here's the logic. You cannot buy a new Boeing 777 for $170 million and let it sit on a concrete for 18 hours a day. That is a huge amount of frozen money, doing absolutely nothing. But for a cheap older plane, that is fine. If the job involves a lot of waiting on the ground, the cheap MD-11 is actually the perfect machine. The golden mean niche. Load capacity. You might ask, why not just use a different old plane? Well, the MD-11 survives because it has a unique superpower – its size. It fits into a perfect niche that no other older plane can fill. Let's look at the alternatives. First, you have the Boeing 767-300 freighter. It is a great plane, but it can only carry about 53 to 58 tons. For long flights between continents, that is often just too small. On the other side, you have the legendary Boeing 747-400. The jumbo jet. It is a monster that can lift 113 to 120 tons. But here's the problem. Flying a 4-engine giant that is only half full is incredibly expensive. It is overkill. This is where the MD-11 hits the absolute sweet spot. It carries roughly 85 to 92 tons. It holds significantly more cargo than the smaller 767. But it is much cheaper to operate than the massive 747. For specific high-volume routes, like Anchorage to Tokyo or Cologne to Louisville, the MD-11 is not too big and not too small. It is just right. Engineering hell and hole number 2. But it is not all good news. The accountants love this plane. The mechanics absolutely hate it. The biggest headache is the number 2 engine, the one stuck right in the tail. Unlike the engines under the wings, you cannot just walk up to this one. It sits extremely high off the ground. Mechanics need special high-lift platforms just to reach it. Changing an engine on the wing is a standard job, but changing the tail engine is a logistical nightmare. It takes much longer and requires way more effort. And the worst part – spare parts. Remember, McDonnell Douglas disappeared in 1997. No one is manufacturing new parts for this plane anymore. So how do FedEx and UPS keep them flying? They have to cannibalize other planes. They buy old retired MD-11s just to strip them for parts, like Vultures. It is the only way to keep the fleet alive. Pilot killer or diva? If the mechanics hate the MD-11, the pilots, well, they respect it, but they also fear it. Some call it the diva, others have darker nicknames. The reason is simple. This plane does not forgive mistakes. Statistically, the MD-11 has a higher accident rate during landings than almost any other modern wide-body jet. You might remember the tragic crashes of FedEx Flight 80 in Narita or Lufthansa Flight 8460 in Riyadh. Both happened right at the moment of landing. Why is it so difficult to land? It comes down to physics. To save fuel and reduce drag, engineers made the horizontal stabilizer, the tail of the plane, smaller than usual. While this made the plane efficient, it also made it less stable. To keep this heavy beast in the air with such a small tail, you have to fly fast. The landing speed, or VREF, is incredibly high, often around 150 to 160 knots, almost 300 km per hour. This is 20 to 30 km per hour faster than similar planes. Everything happens much quicker for the pilots. To help with stability, there is a computer system called LSAS. It is supposed to assign the pilots, but sometimes it behaves unpredictably, fighting against their inputs. The biggest danger is a bounce. If a pilot hits the runway a little too hard, the plane can bounce back into the air. If they try to push the nose down too quickly to fix it, the plane can enter a violent cycle called porpoising. In the worst cases, the nose gear collapses and the plane flips over on its back. It is a powerful machine, but it demands absolute perfection every time it touches the ground. The end of an era. However, nothing lasts forever. The end is finally coming. FedEx has officially announced the beginning of the end. By the year of 2028, they plan to retire their fleet. They are replacing these old warriors with the smaller Boeing 767 for shorter routes and the massive Boeing 777 for the long hauls. But here is the surprise. They are not killing the MD-11 because of fuel prices. The real killer is maintenance costs. As these planes get older, the engines break down more often. When a plane is stuck in a hangar for repairs, it loses money. Eventually, the cost of fixing it becomes higher than the money you save by owning it. Now I want to ask you, do you miss the era of tri-jets, or do you prefer the efficiency of modern twin jets? Write your thoughts below. If you learned something new today, hitting the subscribe button is the best way to support me. As a new channel, every subscriber truly counts and motivates me to create better stories. Click here to watch the next video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.
Look at this airplane. This is the Embraer E2, also known as the Profit Hunter. With its tech shark livery, it looks like the future of aviation. It is the quietest and the most fuel-efficient narrow-body aircraft in the sky. And for us, the passengers, it is a dream. Why? Because there are no middle seats. It's a 2+2 configuration. No more fighting for an armrest with a stranger. On paper, this plane is a masterpiece of Brazilian engineering. It was supposed to be the giant killer, the plane that would make Boeing and Airbus nervous. It consumes 17% less fuel than the previous generation and has the most advanced fly-by-wire system in its class. But here is the mystery. Airlines are not buying it. While Airbus is celebrating hundreds of orders for its rival, the A220, the Embraer E2 is struggling to find a home. In the world of aviation, being the best doesn't always mean you win. Sometimes you can build the perfect machine, but the market simply refuses to take it. How can a plane that is so right be so wrong? Today we are going deep into the numbers. We are looking at why this tech shark is becoming a headache for investors instead of a gold mine. It's a story of great engines, bad timing, and very expensive legal trap. But first, hit the like and subscribe button. This simple action is vital for me. Thank you very much. The engine course. Innovation versus reliability. To understand why the E2 is struggling, we have to look under the wings. This is the Pratt & Whitney GFT, the geared turbofan. It is a technical miracle, but for many airlines it has become a nightmare. Here is the simple science. In a normal jet engine, the fan and the turbine spin at the same speed. But in the GFT, there is a gearbox. This allows the big fan at the front to spin slower, while the turbine inside spins much faster. This makes the engine incredibly quiet and saves nearly 20% on fuel. For an airline, that sounds like a license to print money. But here is the catch. This technology is extremely complex. The gearbox and the new materials inside the engines are under massive heat and pressure. In the first years of operation, these engines started showing teething problems. We are talking about hardware failures, cooling issues, and parts that wear out much faster than expected. Normally, you fix a part and the plane flies again. But today, the global supply chain is broken. There aren't enough spare parts. Now let's look at the math. In the first year of a new aircraft's life, you expect it to be in the air 10 or 12 hours a day. But many E2 operators found their planes stuck on the ground for months waiting for engine repairs. If we compare the E2 to the older E1 during their first years, the dispatch reliability, which is how often the plane is ready to fly on time, was significantly lower for the new model. Airlines hate uncertainty. When a CEO looks at the E2, they don't just see a fuel-efficient jet, they see a risk. They ask, will this plane fly tomorrow or will it sit in a hangar because of a broken gear? For many, the 20% fuel saving isn't worth a plane that cannot fly. The legal trap. How unions grounded a giant. But wait, if the engine is the only problem, Embraer could just fix it, right? Wrong. The biggest problem for the E2 is not mechanical. It is a legal trap called scope clauses. To understand this, we have to look at the United States, the biggest market for regional jets in the world. In the US, major airlines like United, Delta, and American don't fly their own small planes. Instead, they hire regional airlines to do it for them. But here is a very strict contrast between the big airlines and their pilot unions. This contrast is the scope clause. It says, you can use regional pilots, but only if the plane stays under a certain size and weight. There is one specific number that killed the E2. 76,000 pounds. That is the maximum takeoff weight, MTOW, allowed for regional jets in America. The older Embraer E175 fits this rule perfectly. It is the king of the US skies because it weighs exactly what the union allows. But the new E175 E2, because of those big heavy fuel-efficient engines and those advanced wings, it weighs nearly 89,000 pounds. It sounds crazy, doesn't it? Embraer built a plane that is better, cleaner and more quiet. But because of a piece of paper signed by lawyers and unions, it is too heavy to fly in the US. The unions refuse to change the weight limit. They want to protect the jobs of pilots who fly the bigger mainline jets. They fear that if they allow heavier regional planes, the big airlines will stop using large jets and replace them with smaller ones. Embraer made a massive gamble. They believed the rules would change by the time the E2 was ready. They were wrong. The rules stayed the same. And now the E175 E2, the most important version of the plane, has 0 customers in the world's most profitable market. It is a tragedy of modern aviation. You can spend billions of dollars on engineering and create a masterpiece, but you can still be defeated by a single line of text in a legal contract. The shadow of Airbus, a David versus Goliath battle. Now imagine you are a CEO of a mid-sized airline. You need a new jet. You look at the Embraer E2, but then you look at its biggest rival, the Airbus A350. And this is where the shadow of the giant falls over Embraer. The A350 was not always an Airbus. It started as the Bombardier C series, a brilliant plane from Canada. But Bombardier almost went bankrupt building it. Airbus stepped in and used its massive global power to turn it into a superstar. How does Airbus win? It's simple. They are a one-stop shop. Airbus has deep pockets and a huge family of aircraft. When they talk to an airline like JetBlue or Delta,
they don't just sell one plane. They can say, if you buy 50 of our big A321s, we will give you a massive discount on 20 small A220s. Embraer cannot do this. They are a smaller independent company. They have to make a profit on every single jet they sell. They cannot play the same money game as the giant like Airbus. The numbers tell a painful story. Airbus has over 800 orders for the A220. Embraer? They have around 200 for the A2. In the business world, success creates more success. Airlines see everyone else buying the A220, so they feel it is a safer investment. But there is one more secret weapon Airbus has – the pilots. If an airline already flies the Airbus A320, the most popular plane in the world, it is much easier to train their pilots to the A220. It feels like a part of the same family. If they buy the Embraer, they have to build a completely new department for training and maintenance. For many airlines, even if the Embraer is a slightly better technical machine, the Airbus is the better business decision. Embraer is fighting a war against a company that has more money, more influence, and a bigger family. It is a fight that is almost impossible to win. Global survival. Looking for a new home. So, is the E2 dead? Not exactly. Since the US market is blocked by legal rules and Europe is dominated by Airbus, Embraer is looking at the rest of the world. In places like Brazil, India, and Southeast Asia, the scope clause doesn't exist. These regions have thousands of islands and growing cities that need a plane exactly like the E2. Something bigger than a small turboprop, but smaller and cheaper to run than a massive Boeing 737. But the most important test is happening right now, in Canada, with Porter Airlines. Porter is the hero of the E2 story. They didn't just buy a few planes, they ordered up to 100 of them. They are using the E2 to fly long distances, like Toronto to Los Angeles or Florida. Porter is essentially a living laboratory. If Porter can prove that the E2 is reliable, that the engines stay healthy, and that passengers love the 2+2 seating, other airlines will stop being afraid. Porter is the advertising face that Embraer desperately needs. If Porter succeeds, the E2 survives. If Porter struggles, E2 may stay a niche aircraft forever. However, Embraer is smart. They are already preparing a plan B. They know the E2 might never be a global bestseller like the E1 was. So they are moving into a new space – sustainable aviation. While Boeing and Airbus are fighting over big jets, Embraer is designing a new generation of green planes. They are working on high-tech turboprops and even electric aircraft under their Energia project. Their strategy is simple. If you can't beat the giants in the jet market, lead the way in the green market. Embraer isn't giving up. They are looking for every gap in the market that the giants have missed. They are betting that the future of flying isn't just about being big. It's about being smart, efficient, and ready to pivot when the world changes. Now I want to ask you, would you prefer the Embraer E2 over Boeing or Airbus? And what do you think about this company in general? I'd be interested to hear your opinion. If you learned something new today, hitting the subscribe button is the best way to support me. As a new channel, every subscriber truly counts and motivates me to create better stories. Click here to watch the next video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.
Look at this plane, the Boeing 777X. It is a masterpiece of engineering, with its massive folding wingtips and the largest jet engines in history. It was supposed to be the new king of the skies. It was built to replace the legendary 747 and change aviation forever. But there is a problem, a big one. Instead of carrying passengers around the world, these giants are sitting in a hangar, gathering dust. Why? Because in August 2024, the dream turned into a nightmare. It happened during a routine inspection. Engineers were checking the test planes after the flight in Hawaii. They weren't expecting to find anything serious, but then they saw it, a crack. This wasn't just a scratch on the paint. The crack was found in a critical part called the thrust link, a heavy metal component that helps attach those massive engines to the wing. Immediately, Boeing had to make a tough call. Ground the entire test fleet. No more flying, no more testing. Everything stopped. This isn't just another delay in a project that is already 5 years late. This is a major structural failure. So how did the most advanced plane in the world end up broken on the ground? Let's dive into the disaster. Anatomy of a breakdown. When you hear cracked structure, you probably imagine a wing snapping in half like a dry twig. Thankfully, that is not what happened there. The carbon fiber wings themselves are fine. The problem is hidden under the wing, right where the engine connects to the plane. The broken part is called a thrust link. Think of it in this way. The engine is a monster that generates incredible power to pull the plane forward. It needs a very strong connection to transfer that power to the body of the aircraft. That connection is the thrust link. It acts like a massive titanium joint or a heavy-duty arm. Its only job is to push the plane throughout the air. So, here is the scary question. If this link breaks in the sky, does the engine fall off? The short answer is no. Aviation safety is built on a principle called redundancy. If one part fails, another part is ready to catch the load. The engine has multiple attachment points, so even with a snapped thrust link, the engine would stay on the wing and the pilots could land safely. But don't relax just yet. While the engine won't fall off, this is still a catastrophe for Boeing. Why? Because this is a brand new plane. Heavy metal parts usually crack after 20 years of flying, not during a few test flights. This is what engineers call a structural failure. It means the calculations were wrong. Either the metal material was too weak, or the vibrations from the engine were much stronger than Boeing expected. And you cannot fix bad mass with tape. You have to redesign the solution. The curse of GE9X engines. To understand why parts are cracking, we need to look at the beast causing all the stress. Meet the General Electric GE9X. This is not just an engine, it's a monster. It's officially the largest jet engine in history. To give you an idea of the scale, the front fan is so wide that you could fit the entire body of the Boeing 737 inside it. Yes, you heard that right, a whole other plane fits inside this engine. But is it possible to be too powerful? The problems with the GE9X didn't start in 2024. The curse began back in 2019, before the 777X even took its first flight. During ground testing, engineers noticed something alarming. The compressor blades inside the engines were wearing out incredibly fast. They were overheating and deteriorating. Essentially, the engine was hurting itself just by running. General Electric had to redesign these complex parts, which delayed the first flight for a long time. Now, seeing the structural cracks in 2024, it raises a difficult question. Is this engine simply too strong for the plane? It feels like the 777X is operating on the absolute edge of what is physically possible, and the stress is tearing it apart. Innovation or unnecessary risks. But the engine isn't the only thing pushing the limits of physics. Let's look at the wings. To make the 777X efficient, Boeing gave it a massive wingspan of over 71 meters. These long, slender wings are great for aerodynamics. They create amazing lift and save a lot of fuel. But there is a practical problem. The plane is simply too wide. It physically cannot fit into standard airport gates. So Boeing came up with a radical solution. They added a hinge. It is the first commercial jet in the world with folding wingtips. After the plane lands, the pilot flips a switch, and the ends of the wings, about 3.5 meters of them, fold up vertically. It looks like a transformer robot. This clever trick allows this giant to park in the same spots as smaller aircraft. It is an engineering marvel. But ask any mechanic, the more moving parts you have, the more things can break. This mechanism requires complex latches, locks and heavy pins to keep the wings straight during flight. If you look at the recent cracks in the engine mounts, you have to wonder about the wings too. By adding this folding system, did Boeing introduce yet another point of failure? It is a brilliant innovation, but in a project already plagued by structural issues, complexity is a dangerous game. The shadow of the predecessor. Now we have to address the elephant in the room, the ghost that haunts Boeing. When people hear about these problems, they immediately ask one question: is this the next 737 MAX? It is a fair question. The tragedies of the 737 MAX destroyed Boeing's reputation. People became afraid to fly. But it is important to understand that these are two very different situations. The 737 MAX disaster was caused by a software. A hidden computer program called MCAS pushed the plane's nose down, and pilots couldn't fight it. It was a digital trap. The 777X problem is different. It is not software, it is hardware. It is metal and physics. A structural failure like a cracked truss link is a classic mechanical issue. In a way, this is better, because you can see it, touch it and fix it, before anyone gets hurt. However, there is a deeper problem that links both planes: trust. The crack in the 777X was found after the plane had already flown for over 100 hours. Critics argue that this points to the same old problem at Boeing: a broken safety culture. Is the company still trying to rush production? Are they cutting corners to save money? When a passenger steps onto a plane, they don't care if the problem is software or hardware. They just want to know that the company built it right. And right now, Boeing is struggling to prove that they still know how to do that. The economics divide. While engineers try to fix the metal, Boeing's accountants are facing a different kind of a disaster. Time is money, and the 777X is burning billions of dollars. The airlines that ordered this plane are running out of patience. Take Emirates, for example. They are the biggest customer for the 777X. Their president, Tim Clark, has been waiting for this jet since 2020. He isn't just annoyed, he is furious. He has openly criticized Boeing, calling the delays unacceptable. When your most loyal customers start shouting at you in the public, you know you are in trouble. But the real danger isn't just angry words, it is the competition. While the 777X sits broken in a hangar, its rival is already flying high above it. The Airbus A350. The Airbus might be slightly smaller, but it has one huge advantage: it works. It is reliable, efficient and available right now. Airlines hate uncertainty. They need to plan their schedules years in advance. Why would they wait for a maybe from Boeing when they can buy a guarantee from Airbus? If the 777X doesn't fly soon, it risks arriving at the party after everyone has already gone home. By 2027, will anyone still need this plane? Or will the Airbus A350 have already won the war? So the final question remains: when will you actually be able to buy a ticket? The original plan was 2020. That deadline is ancient history. Right now, the most optimistic forecast is 2027. And even that depends on how fast they can redesign the broken parts and convince the regulators. But when it finally arrives at your airport gate, should you be afraid to step inside? Here is the ironic truth. This disaster might actually make the plane safer. The FAA regulators are under immense pressure. They aren't going to sign any papers until they are 100% sure. They are watching Boeing like a hawk. Every crack, every vibration and every bolt is being analyzed with a microscope. Because of these delays and failures, the 777X is going through the toughest certification process in aviation history. Paradoxically, by the time it carries passengers, it might be the most tested and verified aircraft ever built. It has the potential to be the safest king of the skies, if Boeing can survive long enough to finally get it off the ground. So, I have to ask, would you feel safe flying on the 777X in 2027? Or would you stick to Airbus? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. This is a new channel, but I put a lot of effort into every video to make it clear, accurate and worth your time. Now check out this video next. I think you will find it fascinating. Thanks for watching and see you in the sky.
For the last 20 years, the strategy in the Middle East was simple. Copy Emirates. Every airline wanted the biggest planes, the massive hubs, and millions of transit passengers. Just look at Dubai. It is an absolute giant. You see endless rows of the Airbus A350s and terminals packed with people. It is impressive, sure, but let's be honest, it is also chaotic and stressful. Now look at this. This is Muscat. It is calm. It is beautiful. Just a modern Boeing 787 waiting at the gate. While its neighbors are still fighting to be the biggest superconnector, Oman Air has decided to stop the race. They said enough. Instead of copying the giant, they are building the anti-Emirates. Today we are going to look at why Oman Air is shrinking its fleet and why becoming smaller might be the smartest move in aviation in 2026. But first, hit the like and subscribe button. This simple action is vital for me. Thank you very much. The superconnector trap. To understand Oman Air's new plan, we first need to look at the giants next door. For a long time, the aviation world in the Middle East was defined by Emirates, Qatar Airways and Etihad. Their model is legendary. Build a massive airport in the desert, buy hundreds of wide-body planes and connect the entire world through one single hub. It works perfectly for Dubai and Doha, but for everyone else, it is a dangerous trap. Just look at Etihad Airways in Abu Dhabi. A few years ago, they tried to grow too fast. They wanted to catch up with Emirates at any cost. The result was a disaster. They lost billions of dollars and almost went bankrupt. Oman Air was heading down the exact same path. For years, they tried to be a major transit hub. They wanted to funnel millions of passengers through Muscat, just like their neighbors. But the math didn't work. The airline was losing money consistently. They were burning cash just to keep up with the competition. Finally, the leadership realized a hard truth. The market is full. To survive, Oman Air didn't need to get bigger. They need to stop copying the giants and find their own way. The boutique philosophy. So what is the solution? Oman Air calls it the boutique airline strategy. The goal was simple. Get passengers to fly through Muscat to reach London, Bangkok or Sydney. Oman was just a transfer point. But that era is over. Now the focus has shifted from transit to destination. They want to bring tourists to Oman, not just move them across the map. This means they are no longer chasing numbers. They don't want to carry millions of passengers who are just looking for the cheapest economy ticket. Instead, they are focusing on quality. They want the premium traveler who values comfort over house. Think of it like the hotel industry. Emirates is like a massive 5-star mega resort with 3,000 rooms. It is impressive, but it is crowded and you are just one of thousands of guests. Oman Air wants to be the exclusive boutique hotel with only 50 rooms. It is quiet, personal and curated. They are proving that you don't need to be the biggest to be the best. One world, the secret weapon. So how do you survive as a small airline surrounded by sharks? The answer is simple. You don't fight alone. This is the biggest difference between Oman Air and Emirates. Emirates is famous for doing everything by itself. They don't join alliances, they rely only on their own fleet. But Oman Air knows it cannot win that way. In 2025, they made a game-changing move. They officially joined to the One World Alliance. This is their secret weapon. Suddenly, Oman Air doesn't need to buy hundreds of planes to reach the world. By joining the alliance, they instantly gained access to over 1,000 destinations. They can now sell you a ticket to almost anywhere on the planet, using their partners' networks. For years, Qatar was the fierce rival next door. But now, because they are both in one world, the former enemies are partners. Instead of fighting a price war for every single passenger, they can now cooperate. It is a brilliant strategy. Stop the expensive war and start sharing the profits. Optimization over scale. To make this new strategy work, Oman Air had to make some tough choices about their hardware. First, they decided to kill the Airbus A350 fleet. These planes served them well, but they are older and less efficient. In the new boutique era, every drop of fuel counts. Instead, they are betting everything on the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. This is the perfect tool for their mission. Unlike the massive A380, which needs 500 passengers just to break even, the Dreamliner is smaller and lighter. It allows Oman Air to fly long distances on thin routes. Routes that are profitable but simply does not have enough people to fill a giant double-decker plane. For shorter flights, especially to connect with India and neighboring countries, they rely on the 737 MAX. It is efficient and does the job perfectly. But the biggest change is inside the cabin. You won't find first class on their new planes. Oman Air realized that flying empty first-class suites is a waste of money. Instead, they introduced the Business Studio. This is a super business class. It offers the privacy and luxury of first class, but at a price point that makes sense. It is smart luxury, not wasteful luxury. The airport experience. If you have ever transferred through Dubai, you know the struggle. You land, you wait for a train between terminals, you walk for 20 minutes, and you stand in endless lines. It is loud, crowded and stressful. Honestly, it often feels more like a giant shopping mall than an airport. Muscat offers the complete opposite. It is a definition of stress-free. The new terminal in Muscat is designed for speed and comfort. Everything is under one roof. You can walk from your arrival gate to your departure gate in just a few minutes. There are no trains to catch and no marathon walks to endure. The design reflects the country itself. While Dubai screams busy and expensive, Muscat is calm and welcoming. It uses natural light, quiet spaces and elegant architecture. It turns the worst part of travel, the layover, into a moment of relaxation. For a passenger tired after a long flight, silence is the ultimate luxury. The anti-Dubai destination. An airline is always a mirror of its country. Just as Oman Air is the opposite of the Emirates, the country of Oman is the opposite of Dubai. Dubai is famous of having the tallest skyscrapers, artificial islands, and endless hype. It is impressive, but it often feels man-made. Oman is completely different. It is the anti-Dubai. Here, instead of glass towers, you see jagged mountains. Instead of giant shopping malls, you see ancient forts and traditional markets. It offers an authentic Arabian experience, not a theme park. Oman Air uses this difference to its advantage. They don't just want you to change planes, they want you to step outside. That is why they heavily promote their stopover program. They allow passengers to stay in the country for a few days at no extra flight cost. It is a clever deal. Why spend your layover sleeping in an airport chair when you could be exploring the mountains? So will this bold strategy actually work? It is definitely a risk. In the business world, we are usually taught that growth is good. Shrinking your airline to make more money sounds a bit crazy. However, Oman Air is betting that quality wins over quantity. By flying fewer planes and focusing on higher-paying passengers, they hope to finally become profitable after years of losses. In a world where flying often feels like taking a crowded bus with wings, Oman Air is trying to bring back a sense of exclusivity. They realized they cannot beat Emirates at their own game, so they simply stopped playing it. They do not want to be the biggest airline on the planet. They just want to be the best airline for their niche. Now I want to ask you, what would you choose for your next trip? A quick, quiet transfer in Muscat or the shopping and bright lights of Dubai? Let me know in the comments below. If you learned something new today, hitting the subscribe button is the best way to support me. As a new channel, every subscriber truly counts and motivates me to create better stories. Click here to watch the next video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.
Look at these two planes. On one side, you have the Boeing Dreamliner. It's huge, it's famous, it's a symbol of power. On the other side, you have the Airbus A321 XLR. It looks small, like a regular bus with wings. Now, imagine you are an airline CEO. You need to fly from London to New York. Which plane makes you rich? Your intuition says, the big one. More seats means more tickets, right? Well, your intuition is wrong. In modern aviation, the big plane is actually a trap. If you don't fill every single seat, that massive Boeing burns your money fast. But the little Airbus, it's a cash machine. It does the same job, flies the same distance, but costs half of the price to operate. This is the story of how Airbus didn't build a new spaceship. Instead, they took a simple, boring plane and gave it a superpower. With one engineering trick and a calculator, they destroyed Boeing's strategy for the next 10 years. Here's how Airbus outmastered everyone with just one jet. Fasten your seatbelt, check your like and subscription. Let's take off and find out. Strategic trap. What is the middle of the market? To understand why Airbus won, you first need to understand the battlefield. For decades, aviation had two separate worlds. On one side, you had the small single-aisle planes like the Boeing 737 or the standard Airbus A320 that carry about 180 people and are great for short trips like London to Berlin. On the other side, you had the massive wide-body jets like the Boeing 787 or Airbus A350. They carry 300 people and can fly halfway around the world. But between these two, there was a huge gap, a no man's land. This is what we call the middle of the market. Here is the ironic part. Boeing actually owned this market. They had a legendary plane called the Boeing 757. It was powerful and perfect for this middle zone. But in 2004, Boeing made a fatal mistake. They killed the 757. Why? Because Boeing bet everything on the hub and spoke model. They believed that passengers would always fly to big central airports like Dubai or Frankfurt and then switch to a smaller plane. They thought you didn't mind changing planes. But they were wrong. Passengers hate connecting flights. We hate running through terminals. We hate losing our luggage. We want to fly point to point, directly from our home city to our destination. Airbus saw this shift before anyone else, but instead of spending another $15 billion to design a brand new plane to fill this gap, they did something much smarter. They looked at their existing A321, their standard, boring workhorse, and decided to simply modify it. Engineering. How to fit an ocean liner into a minibus. So, what was the secret ingredient? How do you make a short-range plane fly across the ocean? The answer is fuel, but the problem is where to put it. Normally, if you want extra range, you install big removable fuel tanks inside the cargo hold. It works, but it is a bad trade-off. You get more fuel, but you lose space for cargo. You can fly far, but you can't bring a lot of goods. Airbus engineers did something radical. They didn't just put a tank in the plane. They built the tank into the structure of the plane. It is called the Rear Center Tank, or RCT. It's not just a container. It's fully integrated into the fuselage. This masterpiece of packaging holds an extra 12,900 liters of fuel without stealing space from your cargo. This change is massive. It pushed the plane's maximum takeoff weight to 101 tons. For comparison, the original A320 weighed about 70 tons. But this innovation came with a huge risk. Usually fuel tanks are in the wings, far away from passengers. But this new tank, it sits directly underneath the cabin floor, right under your feet. Regulators were worried. What happens if the plane crashes on its belly? Will the tank explode? It was a certification nightmare. There were delays and arguments about fire safety. But in the end, Airbus reinforced the structure and proved it was safe. They took a massive engineering gamble and it paid off. Now let's open the calculator, because this is where the A321 XLR stops being just a plane and starts being a money printer. Let's look at the trip cost, the total price to fly the plane from point A to point B. Imagine a standard 7-hour flight London to New York. If you fly a big wide-body jet, like an Airbus A350 or a Boeing 787, you have a problem. That plane weighs over 120 tons when empty. It burns about 5 to 6 tons of fuel every hour. When you add up fuel, crew and airport fees, that single flight costs the airline between $45,000 to $50,000. Now look at the A321 XLR. It weighs a half as much, about 60 tons. It sips fuel, only about 2.5 tons per hour. The total cost of the same flight, about $25,000. It is literally half the price to operate. But here is the most important number, the break-even point. This is the number of tickets you must sell just to cover your costs. On the big wide-body jet, you need to find about 170 to 200 passengers just to break even. If you sell fewer tickets, you lose money. On the XLR, you only need about 100 passengers to cover the costs. Everything after that is pure profit. Now let's get specific about the fuel comparison with the old Boeing 757. A Boeing 757 is a classical muscle car. It's powerful, but it is thirsty. It burns about 3,600 kilograms of fuel per hour. The A321 XLR is a modern hybrid. It burns roughly 2,400 kilograms per hour. That is a saving of 1,200 kilograms every single hour. If an airline flies this plane for 4,000 hours a year, they save nearly 5,000 tons of fuel per plane. At current prices, that is a saving of $3 to $4 million per plane every single year. If you have a fleet of 50 aircraft, that is $150 million of pure profit just from fuel savings. This is why airlines are rushing to buy it. Changing the map. Are wide-body jets dead? So does this mean the big wide-body jets are dead? Not exactly. On massive trunk routes, like London to Dubai, you still need big planes to carry 400 people at once. But the A321 XLR changes the map for everything else. It allows airlines to play a new game called fragmentation. Instead of flying one big Boeing 777 from London to New York at 1 p.m., an airline can now fly 3 A321 XLRs at 9 a.m., 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. The cost is roughly the same, but the passengers are happier because they have more choices. And what about new routes? Consider a route like Dublin to Cleveland. In the past, putting a wide-body jet on this route was financial suicide. You would lose $20,000 per flight, because there simply aren't enough passengers. But with the XLR, this route became profitable. Airlines can now connect second-tier cities directly. We will see flights like Hamburg to Boston, Edinburgh to Atlanta, or Sapporo to Seattle. You might ask, is it smart to use a small plane at big hubs like Heathrow, where landing slots cost millions? Usually, the answer is no. You want the biggest plane possible to maximize the value of the slot. But the XLR solves a different problem. It allows big airlines to keep their slots active during winter or off-peak times, without burning cash on empty big jets. It gives them flexibility they never had before. The success of this plane is humiliating for Boeing, but it is also a lesson for Airbus itself. 15 years ago, Airbus bet everything on the A380 Super Jumbo. It was a double-decker engineering marvel, but financially, it was a disaster. Airbus spent over $25 billion to develop it. They only sold about 250 units in total. They never made their money back. Now look at the A321 XLR. Because it is a modification of an existing plane, the development cost is tiny compared to the A380. And the sales? Before the first passenger even stepped on a board, airlines had already ordered over 550 units. Indigo, American Airlines, United Airlines, Qantas, Wizz Air, they all want them. With the A380, Airbus built a palace that no one could afford. With the XLR, they built a highly efficient bus that everyone needs. And Boeing? They have no answer. Their competitor, the 737 MAX 10, simply cannot compete. The Airbus can fly 4,700 nautical miles. The Boeing tops out at 3,300. The difference is the difference between arriving safely in Rome or splashing down in the Atlantic Ocean. Why can't Boeing just fix it? They can't. The 737 sits too low to the ground. Its landing gear is too short to fit the bigger engines or wings needed to fly farther. They hit an engineering dead end. To catch up, Boeing needs to design a completely new plane from scratch. That will take 10 years and $15 billion. Airbus didn't just build a plane. They looked at the mass, found a gap in the market, and filled it before the rival even woke up. And that is how Airbus outmastered everyone with just one jet. The passenger experience. But wait, all this talk about fuel and profit is great for the airline. But what about you, the passenger? You might be thinking, 10 hours in a narrow tube? That sounds like a nightmare. Usually, long flights mean big planes with 2 aisles and lot of space to walk around. The A321 XLR has only 1 aisle. So is it going to be a claustrophobic? First, let's talk about the price. Will your ticket be cheaper? It depends on where you fly. Scenario A. On popular routes like London to New York, the answer is yes. Because the XLR is cheap to operate, low-cost airlines like JetBlue or Wizz Air can now fly across the ocean. They will force the big legacy airlines to lower their prices. Competition is good for your wallet. Scenario B. On exotic direct routes like Dublin to Cleveland, the answer is no. You won't get a discount. Instead, you are paying for convenience. You pay to avoid a layover. You are buying time, not a cheap seat. But ask yourself, would you tolerate a thinner cabin if it saves you $200 or gets you home 3 hours faster? Most people would say yes. and Airbus knows it. And that is exactly the question I would like to ask you to share in the comments. I would be very interested to hear your opinion. And if you liked this video, consider subscribing. I'm just starting this channel, but I put a lot of effort into every video to make it clear, accurate and worth your time. And now check out one of these videos. I think you will like them. See you there! In 2019, Airbus made one of the biggest announcements in aviation history. The production of the A380 Super Jumbo jet was finished. The market had clearly decided the huge 4-engine airplane was simply too expensive to operate. Airlines were choosing smaller, more efficient models. And yet, at the same moment, one of Asia's most respected carriers, All Nippon Airways, or ANA, was getting ready to introduce 3 brand new A380s into their fleet. Why? The decision immediately looked foolish. Leading airlines like Air France and Lufthansa were already retiring their A380s years earlier. The industry agreed that these planes were simply becoming too costly. This purchase went against everything ANA stood for. ANA is famous for efficiency. They were the launch customer and still operate the world's largest fleet of the fuel-efficient Boeing 787 Dreamliner. The A380 is the complete opposite. It is a massive aircraft with 4 engines, which means double of the maintenance and much higher fuel consumption compared to the twin-engine jets ANA loves. For a company focused on saving costs, committing over $1 billion to buy these gas-guzzling giants seemed like a terrible, simple mistake. But the decision was never really about the plane itself. It was about a secret, high-stakes battle for the most valuable asset in Japanese aviation. It was about making a calculated sacrifice to defeat a major American rival. The A380 was the price ANA had to pay. Fasten your seatbelt, check your like and subscription. Let's take off and find out. The ghost of Skymark Airlines. To truly understand ANA's strange purchase, we must first look at a smaller company, Skymark Airlines. Skymark was once the 3rd largest carrier in Japan. They tried to compete directly with giants like ANA and GAL. But they made one enormous, fatal gamble. Around 2010, Skymark placed an ambitious order for 6 Airbus A380s. This was a massive decision for a low-cost carrier, far too big for their financial stability. When Skymark couldn't afford the delivery payments and missed important deadlines, Airbus terminated the contract. This led to a huge penalty fee, in a range of $700 million. This fee, which Skymark simply couldn't pay, forced the airline to file for bankruptcy protection in January 2015. When an airline collapses, its most valuable assets are put on a market. For Skymark, the greatest prize wasn't the remains of its old fleet. It was the crucial landing and takeoff slot they controlled, especially at Tokyo's Haneda Airport. To explain the value, think of location. Haneda, HND, is only 14 kilometers from central Tokyo. Narita, NRT, the other major airport, is over 60 kilometers away. For a business traveler, the convenience of Haneda is priceless. Access to Haneda is strictly limited by the Japanese government. These slots cannot be bought or sold directly. For any airline, domestic or international, gaining a single slot at Haneda can unlock billions of yen in annual revenue. Skymark's bankruptcy suddenly put some of the most profitable aviation assets in all of Asia. These vital Haneda slots up for grabs. The battle for Haneda. When Skymark filed for bankruptcy, the fight for its assets quickly became a high-stakes proxy war. ANA had a plan to invest in Skymark, take control and integrate the valuable Haneda slots into its own network. However, ANA had a huge rival, Delta Airlines. Delta saw Skymark's collapse as a perfect opportunity to get a firm foothold in Tokyo. If Delta gained control, they could use Skymark's Haneda slots to launch direct, high-value routes to the United States. For Delta, this access would be an enormous strategic victory in Asia. For ANA, this was a disaster. If Delta got those slots, they would become a direct, powerful competitor right on ANA's doorstep, taking away premium passengers. ANA had to block Delta at any cost. The entire fate of Skymark was decided by a vote among its creditors. The largest shareholder was Interpid Aviation, which leased planes for Skymark. But the creditor with the single most powerful and complicated claim was Airbus. Airbus held a gigantic claim against Skymark, the massive penalty fee resulting from the cancelled A380 order. Because of the size of this debt, Airbus's vote was decisive in a bankruptcy proceeding. They could choose which airline's rescue plan to support, ANA's or Delta's. Airbus saw a chance to recover some of its pride and money after the A380 failure. They essentially delivered an ultimatum to ANA. We will vote against the Delta plan, ensuring you will win the Haneda slots if and only if you agree to take over Skymark's cancelled order for the A380s. ANA didn't want the A380s, but they desperately needed the Haneda slots and they had to stop Delta. So ANA was forced to agree to the deal, accepting the costly and difficult A380s as the ransom price for their most critical strategic asset. Lemons into lemonade. ANA was now stuck with 3 massive A380s they didn't want. The question was, what to do with planes that are too big and too expensive for your main business routes? The A380 simply wasn't the right fit for routes like Tokyo to London or New York. Those routes demand flexibility and frequent flights, which the efficient Boeing 787 and 777 provide. An A380 flight is too large. If a flight is cancelled or delayed, the airline suddenly has 520 passengers who need rebooking, causing a massive logistical problem. ANA had to find a route where the huge capacity was actually an advantage. The answer was Honolulu, Hawaii. Hawaii is the single most popular holiday destination for Japanese tourists. It is a market driven by seasonal peaks and large family groups. This route has historically been dominated by ANA's main rival, Japan Airlines, JAL. ANA realized they could use the A380's high capacity to flood the market, effectively lowering the price per seat and challenging JAL's monopoly. This decision was a strategic attack. Instead of matching JAL's frequency, ANA focused on matching their total volume with just one massive plane. To make the flight itself a unique product, ANA created the Flying Honu concept. They introduced 3 unique liveries, each painted with a different endangered sea turtle. This branding transformed the aircraft from a business problem into a family-friendly tourist attraction. Inside the plane, the layout was designed specifically for leisure travel. The cabin mix. ANA put only 520 seats on a plane, fewer than many competitors, to offer more space. Special features. They added the ANA coaches system in economy class, which allows a row of seats to be turned into a sofa for families. They also added economy class coaches and a premium economy section that was much larger than on other jets. By making the flight part of the holiday experience, ANA turned the difficult, oversized plane into a destination in itself. Was the price worth it? The ultimate question is simple. Did this crazy gamble pay off? Yes, it did. Before the pandemic hit, the A380 was immediately successful on the Honolulu route. The planes were popular with travelers and often flew with a load factor occupancy of over 90%, a huge success for such a large jet. More importantly, ANA achieved its main goal. It broke the dominance of its main rival, JAL. Before the A380, JAL controlled roughly 45% of the highly profitable Tokyo-Hawaii market. After ANA introduced its 3 A380s in 2019, ANA's market share quickly rose to over 40% in just 1 year. JAL lost a massive part of its revenue on that critical route. Let's look at the final numbers. The cost of the 3 A380s was roughly $1.3 billion at list price, a one-time expense. But the strategic asset ANA secured to Haneda Airport is expected to generate an estimated $500 million to $700 million in additional annual revenue for ANA across its entire network. The main lesson here is clear. A strategic asset is always more valuable than an efficient machine. The question was never about the operational cost of the plane. It was about the final price. ANA didn't buy these massive inefficient airplanes. ANA bought an estimated $500 million per year in permanent strategic advantage. They purchased the A380 as necessary entry fee to secure market dominance in Tokyo. What do you think about ANA's decision? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you like this video, consider subscribing. I'm just starting this channel, but I put a lot of effort into every video to make it clear, accurate and worth your time. And now let's meet in these videos. You definitely will find something interesting.
It is difficult to see how the legend, the Queen of the Skies, makes her last flight. But Lufthansa, against all logic, keeps running 747s for decades to come. Frankly speaking, today there are fewer than 39 active passenger 747s, and 27 of them are operated by Lufthansa. That's about 70%. I've prepared some facts for you. Japan Airlines, JAL, formerly the largest operator of 747s, retired them before 2011, shifting long-haul work to the twin-engine 777. Singapore Airlines, the first operator of the 747-400 in 1989, made the Megatop's final flight in 2012. Air France held a farewell ceremony for the Jumbo in January 2016. Ending almost 45 years of using the Jumbo jet. They received their first 747 in 1970. United Airlines and Delta Airlines, the last two US operators, simultaneously completed their final commercial flights with the 747 in the fourth quarter of 2017. Qantas Australia retired its Jumbos in July 2020, conducting a symbolic farewell flight with a kangaroo figure in the sky. British Airways, Europe's largest operator of 747s,
announced in July 2020 that it had made the heartbreaking decision to retire its entire fleet of 31 Boeing 747-400s ahead of schedule due to the pandemic. The airline had been using the 747 for almost 50 years, since the day of Boeing, and had planned to keep them until 2024, but the crisis forced it to say goodbye earlier. So the era of Jumbo is fading away. But why were ultra-high capacity aircraft created? Also, don't forget to like and subscribe, it is vital for me. To understand why Lufthansa keeps the 747 while others retire it, we first need to see why gigantic jets were built at all. First of all, it's the idea of large hubs. In other words, a person flies from their local city, for example to London. Then they fly to New York, and from there take a local flight, for example to Allentown. It means that the country has several large international entry points and a bunch of smaller airports that serve domestic logistics or at best receive flights from neighboring countries. First commercial jetliners like the 707 and DC-8 made long trips faster and cheaper. Passenger numbers grew every year, often by double digits. Older planes simply could not carry enough people on the busiest roads. This is where the 747 idea came from. Airports like Heathrow, JFK, John F. Kennedy International Airport, Narita and Frankfurt were already jam-packed. If you cannot add more takeoffs and landings, you make each flight bigger. One large flight can move a peak-hour crowd better than two small ones. Rules and technology also pushed manufacturers toward big four-engine jets. In that era, two-engine aircraft hadn't yet proven their reliability for many long over-water roads. Regulators often required 3 or 4 engines to be present. Engines themselves were weaker than today's General Electric GE90 or Rolls-Royce Tank XWB. So to lift 350–500 people far and safely, 4 engines were the practical choice. There was another profitable stream – cargo transport. The 747's wide body has big lower holes, so one flight could earn from passengers and freight, very useful across the Atlantic and to Asia. Boeing even planned for a cargo future from day one. They put the cockpit on the upper deck, so the nose could open as a big cargo door. The famous hump was a practical cargo idea first. The upper deck seating area came later. Incidentally, we are currently observing that this calculation has proven successful. Although supersonic passenger aircraft have failed, the market has still shifted towards smaller aircraft. However, the big number of cargo transportation relies on the Boeing 747F. Currently, there are about 350–400 active cargo aircraft of this series. And let me remind you that there are fewer than 39 passenger versions of this aircraft left. And of course, prestige matters. Flag carriers like Pan Am wanted a national flagship. Flying the biggest airliner signaled the status and technical strength of the USA. Put together: big hubs, full airports, older engines, rules, and extra cargo revenue. Very large jets made sense for that time. But why such a wonderful aircraft lost its meaning now? I hope you understand that the reason is not regulators, pollution or noise. If 4-engine double-deck planes still made sense, we would build a new one. We would use General Electric G9X or Rolls-Royce 10 XWB engines, the ones on the 777X and A350. It could have from 600 to 800 seats, maybe close to 1000 in a tight layout. I'll say even more. Per seat, it could be quieter and burn less fuel. Regulators would be happier, airlines would save money. Even within the 747 family progress was made. The 747-8 burns about 50% less fuel than the 747-400, around 3.5 liter per 100 passenger kilometers versus 4.27. However, this still means roughly 30–35% more fuel burn per seat than the Airbus A350-900, around 2.4 liter per 100 passenger kilometer. Lufthansa is well aware of this gap. The oncoming Boeing 777X is expected to offer 25–30 better fuel efficiency per seat than the 747-8, while keeping roughly the same capacity, 400 seats. But that's not the point. The problem isn't tech. The problem is the market. We don't live in a pure hub-and-spoke world anymore. Today, many roads work point to point. You don't have to pass through a mega hub every time. You can board in a regional city and fly directly to another city. Not Milan, Frankfurt, Tokyo. Think Bologna, Fukuoka. On a smaller, efficient twin. What made this possible? Simply because after the arrival of Airbus A300, ETOPS rules changed significantly. Previously, twin-engine aircraft were allowed to be at most 1 hour of flight from a reserve airport. But now this number has grown to more than 6 hours. This means that most routes can now be flown directly. With more direct flights available, passengers value frequency and no connections more than one giant trip through a hub. 2 or 3 mid-size flights a day are better than one huge departure for both passengers and airlines. Passengers can choose their flight time, and airlines take on less risk. But why don't very large jets work in point-to-point? Demand is spread out. You don't have 800 or 1000 people ready at one time. You have 300–400 hours a day in different time slots. If you wait to fill one mega flight, you lose frequency, and you lose passengers. Frequency beats size. 2 or 3 medium-sized flights a day fill the peaks and the valleys. Sales are smoother, the risk of empty seats is lower, ground time is longer for a giant. Boarding 600+ people takes longer, bags takes longer, cleaning and catering takes longer. One delay blocks hundreds of passengers at once. Infrastructure is a limit. Not every airport has gates and stands for this size. Some runways and taxiways aren't related for it. Even if you can land, turnarounds are slow and expensive. If you look closely, there are only a few routes in the world that truly need a Boeing 747 or an Airbus A380. Emirates currently has 63% of all A380s. And not least, they keep them for PR purposes. Lufthansa operates 70% of all passenger Boeing 747s. The real need of ultra-high capacity aircraft is somewhere around 100 planes. That isn't enough to keep building new aircraft of this size profitably. Now let's return to the existing fleet of Boeing 747s. A 747-8 burns more fuel per seat than a modern twin. Think roughly 3.5 liter per 100 passenger kilometer for a 747-8 versus 2.4 for an A350-900 or 2.5 for a 787-9. Same range, similar seats, but the twin is cheaper to fly. 4 engines mean more maintenance, more shop visits, more parts, more inspections. Even if each engine is smaller, 4 are still costlier than 2 per flight hour. Per seat, new twins are quieter and cleaner. Many airports provide lower fees for lower noise and emissions. Night restrictions also hurt older jets more. Twins are more flexible in the network. They turn faster on the ground. Airlines can swap them between routes easily. They also fit more airports. A350 or 787 are code E almost everywhere, while a 747-8 code F needs specific gates and stands. Even more, most passenger 747-400s are 20-30 years old. Heavy D checks are expensive and take the jet out of service for weeks. Cabins also need full refits to match today's standards. But resale values are low. Big money in an old airframe rarely pays back. Lufthansa remains one of the few carriers that continues to actively operate the legendary 4-engine Boeing 747 on passenger flights. As for 2025, Lufthansa's fleet includes 19 Boeing 747-8 intercontinental airliners, making the company the largest operator of the Queen of the Skies in the world. In addition, Lufthansa still uses a limited number of older Boeing 747-400s, 8 active aircraft with an average age of about 25 years. Lufthansa was the launch customer for the passenger version of the 747-8 and has a long history of operating various modifications of the 747 since 1970. They received the first production Boeing 747-8 Intercontinental in May 2012. And also, in June 2014, Boeing delivered the 1500 747, also a 747-8i for Lufthansa. Despite the high operating cost of 4-engine aircraft, Lufthansa has concrete reasons for delaying the retirement of the Boeing 747-8 and even 747-400. Delivery delays of replacement aircraft. The airline planned to phase out older types, for example 747-400 or A340 sooner, but faced a problem. Boeing delayed deliveries of its new long-haul 787 Dreamliner and 777X. As a result, Lufthansa had to keep flying existing 747-400s and A340s longer to cover long-haul network needs. According to Lufthansa, by 2024, its fleet was supposed to include 41 new Boeing 787-9 and 777X aircraft, but those deliveries slipped. So on many routes, the 747-400 and A340 remained in service in place of the new jets. In short, manufacturer delays effectively extended the jumbo's life at Lufthansa. High seat count and capacity demand. The Boeing 747 remains hard to replace on routes with very high passenger demand. Lufthansa uses the 747-8 just on these routes. In slot-contained hubs, for example Frankfurt, New York JFK, a large aircraft lets the airline carry more people per movement, using limited slots more efficiently. In some countries and cities there are regulatory or infrastructure limits on flights frequency, so one heavy 747 can be optimal instead of two smaller jets. This strategy makes sense on key trunk routes in Lufthansa's global network. For example, from Frankfurt to New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Washington, Singapore, Seoul, Johannesburg and others, where demand is consistently strong. First-class product and brand differentiation. Lufthansa positions itself as a premium carrier, and on certain long-haul routes, the percentage of first class and a large business class cabin is critical. The 747-8 is deliberately configured with fewer total seats than the 747-400, 364 versus 371, to allow a much larger premium cabin, 8 first class and 80 business class seats, the highest premium count of any Lufthansa's aircraft, even more than the A380's 78 business seats. This matters for retaining high-yield corporate clients who expect a top-tier product. Lufthansa's leadership notes that both passengers and crews love the 747 for its comfort and special atmosphere. The upper deck hump with its cozy cabin is a unique advantage that twin-engine types can't replicate. As I already said, Lufthansa's Boeing 747-8 has 88 premium seats. That's 8 in first class and 80 in business class. The regular A350-900 without the new allergic cabin has only 48 seats in business class. The allergic A350 has even fewer, 4 in first class and 38 in business class. This means the 747-8 carries between 83 and 110% more premium seats. According to IATA, premium tickets cost about 5 times more than economy on average. So those extra 40 to 46 premium seats can make a big difference to revenue, especially on routes where flight numbers are limited, like Frankfurt to New York. Belly cargo capability and revenue. Another argument for the 747 is its exceptional cargo capacity. The 747's fuselage let 2 standard LD containers sit side by side in the lower holds, so it can carry significantly more freight in the belly than smaller twin-engine jets. On many long-haul routes, especially to Asia, North America and Africa, cargo contributes a meaningful share of revenue. Using the Boeing 747 gives Lufthansa extra profit from freight without mounting a separate freighter flight. A fully loaded passenger 747-8 can carry up to around 20-25 tons of cargo, in addition to passengers. Something smaller twins like the A350-900 or 787-9 simply can't match in volume. Boeing's oncoming 777-9 is expected to preserve similar belly cargo space while burning roughly 30% less fuel, making it the logical successor of this role. For example, flights to industrial centers, China, India, or major US hubs are consistently full with both people and freight, goods, mail and else. The 747-8's long range, around 14,000 kilometers, allows the airline to operate the longest sectors at full load, without sacrificing cargo. For Lufthansa, this is the key profitability level. When fully loaded with passengers and cargo, the jumbos can be very profitable, despite higher fuel burn. Because it carries more paying tonnage per departure. Maximizing ROI on already owned assets. The Boeing 747-8s are relatively young, delivered from 2012 to 2015, and Lufthansa bought them on attractive terms. As launch customer, Lufthansa ordered 747-8i in 2006 with list price of $5.5 billion. But after large discounts, the effective price was about 3.2, approximately 160 million per aircraft. The airline aims to work off that investment over the aircraft's full useful life. Most Lufthansa 747-8s have not yet reached even half of their design life, so it is economically sensible to keep operating them, especially with lease or depreciation already partly paid down. Even if new types promise lower operating costs, a properly deployed 747-8 can still deliver solid returns. From a capital cost perspective, each 747-8 seat costs Lufthansa around $449,000, around 5% less than the equivalent figure on the Airbus A380. On dense roads with high load factors, this makes the Jumbo competitive, despite higher fuel burn. As Lufthansa notes, while newer jets have lower maintenance and fuel costs, on dense roads with strong demand, the 747-8 provides excellent ROI, return on investment. In other words, when the Jumbo flies full, its seat cost can be fully competitive. Prestige and the emotional factor. While not purely economic, Lufthansa has repeatedly emphasized its special attachment to the Boeing 747 as part of the brand's story. Having the 747 in the fleet sets the airline apart and supports its image. Many customers actively choose 747 flights for the unique Queen of the Skies experience. CEO put it plainly: "Our crews love the 747, our passengers love it." At Lufthansa, we are now looking at another modernization of our 747-8s across all classes, so this aircraft can fly well into the next decade. In that sense, keeping the 747 is also about the soul of the Lufthansa brand, which has long been associated with jumbo jets. Routes for Boeing 747. All Lufthansa passenger 747s are based in Frankfurt, FRA. From there, the jumbos run long-haul flights on several continents. In the 2024 schedule, the 747-400 and 747-8 together cover about 20 destinations worldwide. Most flights go to North America and Asia, with a few South America and Africa. Map 1. 747-400. On screen you can see the regular 747-400 routes from Frankfurt in 2024. These show up in a steady pattern, often once per day. In North America, the 747-400 flies to New York, JFK, Washington Dulles, Toronto, Vancouver and Houston. In Asia, it serves Bengaluru, Seoul, Delhi and Mumbai. Demand on these routes is strong enough to fill a large aircraft throughout the year. For example, Flights to New York, JFK, are operated twice a day, and one of these flights, LH400-401, is scheduled especially for the 747-400. In Canada, Toronto and Vancouver are typically seasonal peaks when summer traffic is high. Map 2. 747-8. Now you are seeing the 747-8 network for 2024. The newer 8 version covers a wider set of long-haul routes. In North America, it flies daily to Los Angeles, San Francisco, Miami, Mexico City, Chicago, Newark, and it also covers one of the 2 daily Washington IAD flights. In Asia, it serves Tokyo, Haneda, Singapore, Shanghai, seasonally alternating with the A340-600, and shared with the 400 versions Seoul and Barnaul. In Africa, the 747-8 operates Frankfurt-Johannesburg. In South America, Lufthansa uses the 747-8 to São Paulo and Buenos Aires. These are long 11-13-hour sectors that need both range and a lot of seats. The choice of these 747 routes comes from a mix of factors: very high passenger demand, often with a large premium share, strong cargo volumes, and the right infrastructure at the destination airports. Almost all of these cities are major international hubs or megacities, where Lufthansa can fill a 364-seat 747-8 without trouble. For example, flights to New York, Los Angeles, and Singapore draw many business travelers and tourists, and the 747's belly holds are often packed with cargo, which makes the flight even more profitable. In Mexico City, MEX, and Johannesburg, GNB, elevation also matters. These airports sit height above sea level, the air is thinner, and full-weight takeoff is harder. In such conditions, the 4-engine 747 provides stronger thrust and performance compared to twin-engine types, which adds confidence in safety and schedule reliability. Finally, there is a historical element. Lufthansa has flown the Jumbo to places like Tokyo and Johannesburg for many years. And these services are part of the airline's identity, which also supports demand. Many aviation geeks and loyal customers choose the 747 on purpose. Why Boeing 747 and not Airbus A380? But you may ask me, why Boeing 747, not Airbus A380? It seems more suitable for super heavy routes. Lufthansa's Airbus A380 has 509 seats. At first, 78 business, 52 premium economy and 371 economy. To keep even an 85% load factor, the airline must sell about 433 seats on every flight. Outside peak season, that's hard to do. The Boeing 747-8 in Lufthansa's layout has 364 seats, so it is much easier to fill year-round. This reduces the risk of flying with hundreds of empty seats and allows the airline to run more frequent flights, instead of relying on one giant departure. Infrastructure matters too. Both aircraft are Code F, but the A380 needs special 2-level boarding bridges for quick turnarounds. A normal turnaround of an A380 takes about 90–110 minutes. The 747-8 can use standard single-level gates, making it easier to operate at airports that don't have full A380 facilities. Cargo is also critical. The passenger 747-8 can carry 36 LD3 containers in the lower deck, 20 in the front hold and 16 in the rear. After passenger baggage, about 26 LD3 positions remain for freight. roughly 115.9 cubic meters. The A380 can fit 38 LD3 containers, but with a full passenger load, around 16 go to baggage, leaving about 22 LD3 for cargo. In real operations, the 747-8 often carries more belly cargo than the A380 on long-haul flights. Range and weight also play a role. The 747-8i has a range of 7,730 miles, about 14,310 kilometers, wingspan 68.4 meters, and maximum takeoff weight (MTOW) of about 447 tons. The A380-800 can fly 8,000 miles, about 15,200 kilometers, wingspan 79.8 meters, MTOW about 575 tons. That higher empty weight on the A380 often eats into its usable cargo capacity on the longest sectors. The lighter 747-8 can keep both passengers and cargo at maximum load, even on 14,000 kilometers routes like Frankfurt-Buenos Aires or Frankfurt-Singapore. Fuel burn is another factor. The 747-8 burns about 3.5 liters per 100 passenger kilometer on long-haul flights. The modern Airbus twin A350-900 does about 2.4, but the A380 is only competitive when it's nearly full. If the A380 has dozens or hundreds of empty seats, its fuel burn per seat rises much faster than on smaller aircraft. Two final numbers show the logic. Lufthansa has 8 A380s, with 509 seats each, and 19 747-8s, with 364 seats each. On routes that reliably fill 350-420 seats per day and carry significant belly cargo, the 747-8 offers steadier economics, more flexible scheduling, and better compatibility with the global 747 cargo system. That's why, for Lufthansa, it's 747, not A380. The future of the Boeing 747 at Lufthansa – plans and statements. Nevertheless, Lufthansa's management has clearly outlined its plans to retire older 4-engine aircraft over the next few years. According to the company's report, all Boeing 747-400s, along with Airbus A340-300s and A340-600s, will be withdrawn from service by 2028. This will mark the end of an era. By the late 2020s, Lufthansa will no longer have any of the classic jumbo 747-400, currently 8 units, or A340s, about 27, combined across Lufthansa and Swiss. The decision is driven by simple economics. These aircraft are expensive to operate and outdated, while replacements are already on the way in the form of a new A350s, 787s and 777Xs. Once deliveries of new aircraft stabilize, Lufthansa will systematically phase out all 747-400s and A340s, many of which are already in reserve or flying limited schedules. The newer Boeing 747-8s, however, are a different story. Lufthansa plans to keep them in service at least until the middle 2030s. In 2023, CEO publicly stated that the 747-8 would remain in the fleet well into the 2030s and would be upgraded across all service classes. This commitment is backed by action. Lufthansa has launched its long-haul cabin renewals program, called Allergies. which will introduce entirely new first, business, premium economy and economy products to existing aircraft. An official Lufthansa Group press release confirms that the Boeing 747-8 will be refitted with allergy seating in every class. Lufthansa Technik will handle the work, starting in 2024, first upgrading the main lower deck with new business and economy cabins, then moving to upper deck and first class. This is an unprecedented investment in the 747 fleet, signaling that Lufthansa intends to operate them for at least another decade to cover the cost of modernization. Between 2025 and 2030, the 747-8 will remain a core part of Lufthansa's premium offering, alongside a small reactivated fleet of Airbus A380s, brought back temporarily to meet increased demand on some routes. In a sense, Lufthansa's strategy balances the gradual retirement of older 747-400s with the maximum possible service life for the newer 747-8s. The airline recognizes that there is currently no direct, full equivalent replacement for the Queen of the Skies. The 777X is slightly smaller, and the A380 is larger, but less versatile. As a result, the 747-8 will continue flying under Lufthansa colors for many years, preserving the airline's unique status as a special operator of jumbo jets. Aviation analysts note that Lufthansa is currently the best chance for travelers to experience a passenger 747 in the 2020s, as most other carriers have already retired them. Of course, in the longer term, the 747-8 will also be retired, most likely replaced by new Boeing 777Xs or Airbus A350-1000. But until then, Lufthansa will remain one of the last strongholds of the jumbo era. As the airline's top management put it, the 747 is part of Lufthansa's DNA, and they are proud to showcase this remarkable aircraft for many more years. This is a rare case in aviation, where cold financial logic aligns with love for a legend, the Boeing 747, which continues to earn both revenue and passenger hearts in the skies of the 21st century. Nevertheless, what will change for us, the passengers, when the 747-8s are retired? Or the A350 be able to provide the same experience and level of comfort as these aviation legends? Perhaps they will even be better in some ways. The Airbus A350 has a composite fuselage that allows to a lower cabin altitude of about 6,000 feet or 1,800 meters, compared to roughly 8,000 feet or 2,400 meters on older 747s. This means higher humidity and more comfortable pressure levels, so passengers feel less tired and dry on long-haul flights. The Boeing 777X, while built with a metal fuselage, uses an advanced air conditioning system that also maintains a 6,000-foot cabin altitude and humidity levels similar to the 787 and A350. In this respect, these new twins are on par with the A380, which was also known for improved cabin air quality. Noise and ride comfort will also improve. Both the 777X and A350 are much quieter than the 747, thanks to modern engines and aerodynamics. The A350 is famous for having an exceptionally quiet cabin, with noticeably lower noise levels than the 747. The 777X will also feature Boeing's smooth ride technology from the 787, an active turbulence damping system that helps deliver a more stable flight even in choppy air. Cabin space is another upgrade. The 777X fuselage is several inches wider than the 747's, allowing for wider seats. Engineers have thinned the sidewalls, expanded the overhead bins, and created more open space in the cabin. The 777X will also have the largest windows of any jet in this class, about 15–20% larger than those on the 747. Positioned higher, so passengers can see the horizon more easily. The A350 also offers large panoramic windows, a bright and airy cabin, and modern LED lighting. On the 777X, lighting will even include sky ceiling effects that can simulate a starry night. Finally, onboard technology will be a leap forward. Both the A350 and 777X will feature the latest in-flight entertainment systems, full Wi-Fi connectivity, and highly customizable lighting environments. In first class, the 777X will debut private suites that rival and in some ways exceeded the luxurious offerings once introduced on the A380. Comfort in the next generation of aircraft will no longer depend on the size of the jet, but on innovation, design, and passenger-focused details. What do you think? Of course, write your thoughts in the comments. I would be interested to hear your opinion. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It is vital for me. By the way, if you have any suggestions for collaboration, I've left my contact details in the description. Now let's meet in one of these videos. You are sure to find something interesting.